I don't need to see that.
Come on. It's a beautiful Friday morning here in Southern California. Got beautiful music starting off the day, and my air drumming is not your thing?
No. But Tom May says he's been fired again. What does that mean?
Well, I got a note from Tom May this morning, and Tom is a great friend of the show, a good friend of mine. Done some work with him years ago, and a data genius when it comes to sales and rev ops. And he said, "What, you on vacation again this week? No around the horn?" And they sent me that on LinkedIn, and I popped him back a note with literally a screenshot of him getting the invitation. So somehow it's Tom. It's not us. It's LinkedIn.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
So
okay.
there we go. So
All right.
and look, Will Quinn starting off the morning right off the bat with top. I'm going to guess that's top comment of the day. Just 2 minutes in.
Yeah, you're on a roll. And good morning to Brian as well.
You're not going to highlight Will's comment that he likes my air drumming?
Sure, we'll do that.
Okay,
we'll do that. All right.
All right, Will. Thank you, my friend. So very good. Brian Conley, good to see you. Got other folks coming in on YouTube and Facebook as well. And then later today, we'll have the podcast live. So how are you, Tom?
Good. Feels like we haven't done this for a while.
We missed a week. I was out last Friday, and sometimes when traveling, we're in a place to be able to do the broadcast remotely. Last week, I was not in a position to do that. And in fact, next week we probably have to chat through that because I'm at a conference with affiliated distributors next week. So we're either going to do something from the trade show booth or we'll pre-record something. So we'll sort through all that. Maybe we can
maybe Tom May can come on and co-host with me.
Yeah, I mean, it can't get any worse, is what you're going to say, right? So very good. Well, I'm happy to be back. I've been up in San Francisco the last couple of days. I was at a technology conference, which was just fantastic, called SaaStr, and it's they call it where the cloud meets. And it's kind of interesting because our podcast here and our weekly live show, we talk about the economy and technology and all of these things and how they relate to wholesale distribution. Almost all the events that we go to, at least on for me, is going to. Tom, that was a compliment. I don't know. He said that hurt. I was trying to compliment him. I get it. I said couldn't be any worse. I was waiting for you to dig it on me, and I was trying to compliment Tom. And so sorry about that, buddy. Anyways, SaaStr was great because we spend so much time. We talk. Our product is developed for manufacturers and wholesale distributors. That's what Lead Smart's all about. Those are the events we go to. I got to go dive into the technology world for a few days, talking with other company founders and service providers there and listening to some conferences. And I tell you, I've never met more people that were wanting to help and be supportive in forever. It was a great couple of days. So nice to be back, but good event.
Great. Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, let's jump into things.
Yeah. I was going to, on the last note on that, I know you don't like to travel as much or aren't as willing to as I am, but you're coming to that event next year.
Okay. I've got some travel as well. And as Brian's reminding, Salesforce Dreamforce next week as well. Yeah. So
it's interesting, Brian, as a side note, hotels were reasonably priced for the SaaStr event. But the hotel I stayed in by the San Francisco airport probably will be 2.5 times the price next week. But there was a bunch of Salesforce people there, Brian. I got to talk to a handful of them. So in fact, they were all members of your fan club. So I'll give you a call sometime soon, Brian. All right, let's dive in, huh? Let's talk before we do that about who we are, what we do, and why we're just two ugly old dudes chatting here on LinkedIn and these other platforms. But I'm Kevin Brown. That's Tom Burton. Tom is my co-founder, business partner, lifelong friend, and we are the founders of LeadSmart Technologies. LeadSmart is a AI-enabled CRM and customer intelligence solution that is specifically developed for manufacturers and wholesale distributors. We don't sell to construction companies or law firms. We wouldn't sell to a school district. We take care of manufacturing and wholesale distribution. My background is my entire career is in that arena. Tom's background is in technology, and we get together every week to review through the news and happenings in the world, the US, North America, related to the economy, mergers and acquisitions, eCommerce, AI, all kinds of different technology solutions. But we try to bring all that together in a way that benefits the folks in the whole, what we call the wholesale distribution ecosystem, manufacturing, manufacturers, representatives, and distributors. So, blah, we got that out of the way. The last piece of that is we're going to be discussing this morning the Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution newsletter. If you don't get that newsletter and you would like to, a couple of easy ways to get it. You can go quickly and easily to www.aroundthehornpod.com, where all of our past episodes are, and you can sign up for the newsletter. Or you can send us an email that's to hello@leadsmarttech.com, and we will get that out to you right away. If you're listening on the podcast later today, this is a Friday morning, September 8th, and you're listening at another time to the podcast, you will not be seeing the screen that we have here on our live broadcast where we look at the newsletter and we talk about the articles of the week. So, Tom, I covered our housekeeping. Dive in on article number 1, if you would.
Let's do it. So, as usual, starting off a little economic news, U.S. manufacturing sector stabilizing at weaker levels, though, in August. So, Kevin, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's kind of important we talk about a little bit of different things. In fact, we were talking about this a few weeks ago when Ian Heller was on with us about, all the different factors that we can look at, and they all have a little bit different spin and a little different bend to them. This is tied to the, Purchasing Managers Index. It's a great index. Obviously, you want to be over 50% because that gives you kind of the sentiment of what's going on in the marketplace. So, the good news is, things increased in July, improved, and it had slumped in June. So I think this just ties back to, and I threw this article in because, I just was saying this conference I was at, and I was listening to a couple of very well-known both venture capitalists, their authors, their podcasters, their event guys, and their entire business is tied to what's going on in the economy as venture capitalists. And, the sentiment out there when you look at a lot of the arena is that we've probably hit that bottom and we're starting to make some moves. There was some rumoring this morning that I think I read something on Yahoo Business this morning that I think it was the New York Fed chairman was feeling like we've probably maybe settled into a spot. Maybe we don't need a lot of additional increases, if any. So there's that sentiment that's kind of moving. I think you and I are on a little bit different pages of that. I think, I kind of look at it as maybe we're getting through this and we didn't even feel it fully. And I think you've got a different take, but this is kind of giving us this article talking about manufacturing sector stabilizing within July and August. I think it's a good bellwether to get that positive conversation started.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk about my less bullish view of things, but I do think that I think there's another shoe to drop that I think is being ignored a bit. And we've talked a little bit about this predominantly around commercial and consumer debt and a lot of things coming to fruition on that. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, which is really a separate situation, right? It's a situation that's been created by this, but as it relates to inflation, other than gas prices here in Santa Barbara, which continue to go up every single day for whatever reason.
What is it? What is it this week?
5-something, I don't know, 5.15 or something like that.
So I when I left for the airport the other morning, I needed to get some gas, and 5.79 for mid-grade.
Yeah, but not a week ago, but maybe 2 weeks ago was 4.15 or something. So it's
Okay.
It's gone up a lot in the last.
Good for you. I haven't seen below $5 in 3 or 4
Okay.
months.
Anyway, but yeah, I do think, if we're looking at just some of the economic aspect of things, the interest rate situation, inflation, all of that, I do tend to agree that that's coming to maybe a bit of a leveling out. I think, though, that there's just this another shoe to drop that hasn't really been looked at, which is the ramifications of the debt that we have
Mhm.
out there. And we saw a snapshot of that with Silicon Valley Bank, not so much debt wise, but just, the way with treasuries and all of that, it's
Right.
still manifests itself with the higher interest rates. We'll see, but I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves until we see some of that playing out. That's my.
Well, let's chat about that, or just unpack that just a touch further. It really comes to mind. As this ties in, right? Our focus here is on wholesale distribution and manufacturing. So you had mentioned consumer debt, right? And that's getting hammered because interest rates have gone up, right? So now if you've got a high level of consumer debt, your interest rates are higher, right? I see the trickle down of this from a standpoint, and feel free to throw stones at this, and anybody want to comment on this, that's fine. In my mind, I'm looking through this and saying, okay, so consumer debt, if they're buying less, and there was, some of the articles we've read in the last few weeks talk about maybe they're buying less, large manufactured items. So that could tie into things. But when we start talking about the world of wholesale distribution, hospitals are still being built, roads are still being fixed, right? We're probably going to see more data on a slowdown in residential building, right? But commercial building is what impacts more of our typical listener here. So I'm kind of wondering if we're going to see this, because our audience and our customers at LeadSmart have been bullish through this whole economic turmoil, right? So I think your position is kind of tied to global economy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah.
I would say that.
And then I think, but if you take a look at that, there's this consumer side, and then there's this commercial or wholesale side of things. And I think that's probably stabilized and going to hopefully continue to stay strong.
Yeah, well, and even just looking at it from that perspective, there's a lot of commercial debt, especially around
Yeah.
real estate,
Yeah.
that's much shorter term debt than you have with your traditional 30-year residential mortgage.
Absolutely. Yep.
And a lot of that debt was taken on. Even look at multifamily and a lot of the things that were done in that area. It was taken on at low rates.
Mm-hmm.
And those, 3 to 5 year terms, those rates
Right.
are now getting expired, or they're having to refinance. They can't
Right.
refinance at the same rate. So yeah, there's an economic trickle down. So yes, I'm looking at it, I think, a bit more macro than I am at the micro level.
Right.
But of course, there's all this stuff happened that we've been dealing with has been at a macro level, not at a micro level along the way.
No, I think you're right. What's interesting is I look at this PMI, and I look at the Fed, and there's some other factors we're going to talk about in a few minutes with what the FTC is doing on some things. And especially as we move on to the next article in a moment, but before we go, it makes me continue to think, Tom, and I bring this up all the time. The baseline economic factors, right, and or this PMI we're talking about, right, the legal ramifications that the FTC is using, how the Fed looks at the economy of consecutive quarters, of XYZ happening. I just starting to think, we're really probably using antiquated metrics. I'll just call it that way. Antiquated metrics for a marketplace and an economy and a global economy that is just so different than it's historically been, that I'm sure there's somebody out there, smart guys writing books, economists, about maybe different ways to track or manage, to really look at what's happening out there, because there's two sides to every coin, right?
Well, we should put it all into Chat GPT and look at all the variables and have it come back with some answers. But yeah, I think the problem is the statistics, or the benchmarks that we use, are definitely antiquated. There's so few of them, right? There's so few of them, and yet there's so many variables that impact all of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, we've just touched on a handful of them, but there's literally hundreds of different variables that can impact things one way or the other.
Right.
And we tend to look at things through, core inflation, or PMI or some of these other things that are there. And those are just one piece of the bigger equation. Anyway, I agree with you. I wanted to hit on Tom's comment. And by the way, Tom, just for the record, I would welcome you as a co-host with me on the podcast here, regardless of what Kevin says. I would welcome you here. But he says, what is the cost of gas doing to distribution? I think that's a good question, right? If that continues to rise and we don't know, what does that do to distribution and everything else that's, delivery, all the freight stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah.
Again, don't know.
Well, I don't know if he's in a position to comment on this, but the comment here in our chat on the live broadcast that we're on this morning above Tom's is from Mike Mortensen with ARG. And I don't know if Mike's in a position where he could comment or type something in, he might be listening on the fly or in the vehicle or something. But Mike runs a large distribution company in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. And I'm sure in Alaska, fuel prices are probably similar to what they are here. And so he may have a comment on that. But I mean, no matter how you slice it, right? If you're in a place where you're paying, 10, 20, 30% more in fuel than you were 6 months ago, right? Or 2 years ago, whatever it is, and you're running a fleet of delivery trucks, it has a big impact, right, on your business, no matter how you slice it. It's just same thing is, I'm sure people are evaluating no different than a consumer would be, is, do I really want to drive to grandmother's house this weekend? Or could I just, find a different way to get with grandma because it's expensive?
Yeah.
No different than sending a delivery truck out. And, the majority of wholesale distributors out there, well, there you go. Mike just said paid $5.45, and Mike's got a fleet of trucks and a bunch of sales guys out in trucks. And so, paying $5.45 a gallon of gas is going to have an impact on your bottom line.
All right, let's move ahead.
All right. So this lovely woman at the FTC is doubling down on her fight with Amazon. So this article is from CNBC. In fact, the previous article is from Reuters. From CNBC, we've got this article about this Amazon lawsuit from the FTC. It's been talked about for a couple of years now that it's likely coming. They did their what did they call that meeting? I wrote a note. Last rights meeting is what they called the meeting that the FTC had with Amazon over this this monopoly type thing of the FTC looking to break up Amazon. And it's a really interesting thing. And the reason we included that this weekend to talk about that whole thing is, we spend time each week talking about e-commerce, right? We have, for the most part, most wholesale distributors are getting involved or have a plan in place or are developing a plan to include e-commerce. And many of those, their e-commerce solution is not just selling on their own website, but it's on selling on marketplaces and so forth. And there's no bigger marketplace that you can do that than on Amazon. And then what we're seeing as well now is major brands are manufacturing brands are putting their wares available, online, and looking at Amazon Business as just another distributor of their product. There's some big impact that can be coming out of this. And it's something that, we might look at it and say, well, my wife gets 10 packages a week from Amazon and I get, one every 2 weeks or whatever. And it's nice that we can buy a pair of shoes or whatever, but it's very different when we start talking about the impact that can have on selling tools or safety equipment or whatever it might be. So this is something to pay attention to.
Yeah. And I honestly don't know a ton about what this latest lawsuit is and exactly what she's proposing and how it would be broken apart and all of that. But I am concerned a bit, is it seems like there's a lot more meddling with the FTC in a lot of these things, and especially on some of the M&A, mergers and acquisitions type of things.
Agreed.
I mean,
yeah, good point.
That really affects the startup economy and the at SaaStr where you just were, and the whole venture capital world, right? Exits come from ultimately exits come from large M&A transactions. And when you start messing with those or causing somebody to think twice about doing one, what does that do as far as a trickle down? So
right.
I don't know the specifics of this. I should probably know more about some of this, but there is some.
No, I was going to talk to you about how uninformed you are.
Well, I don't watch the news, so there you go. If I didn't come to this every week, I wouldn't know anything that was going on.
That's right. So. Well, the key components of this, right, are the overall business model of Amazon, a big part of it being fulfillment by Amazon and how that they manage things and control things, the overall logistic programs, and then third-party sellers and the pricing models that they push. Now, I look at this, right, is I don't want to, I'm not in the know enough or an expert in this arena to really throw rocks. Here's how I look at it. And you and I have both had in different businesses, right? And my wife as well, and your wife as well, have all had Amazon businesses before. I've worked with brands on a consulting basis that are doing things there. And I've had my own experience selling online. And my wife, as I said, has as well. All of us have very challenged or negative experiences with some of the policies from Amazon, right? That through the pandemic, my wife started importing some products and we just got absolutely hammered by some policy changes and some things that went on during the pandemic, and Amazon financially hammered by this investment we had made. But I do not want the FTC going and meddling in this business, right? The market, in my opinion, one guy's opinion, the marketplace should balance this out, right? I've got 2 emails this week from Walmart's business program that they're offering in their business, that, and if there's anybody that could come after Amazon, I don't think anybody's ever going to squash Amazon, but there are people that could nip at their heels and force them to look at their policies, and Walmart would be that one. The meddling of this, because, and the challenge, I think part of it I have with this is that so much of this is agenda driven politically and individually. And, there's in this article, it talks about a Meta head or Facebook. This same FTC commissioner came after them as well. And they actually filed a court action. So let me rephrase that. She had talked about the need to come after Facebook and Amazon. She wrote this major paper that they say went viral before she was ever even appointed at the FTC. Biden administration brought her in, right? And then she goes charging after them based upon what her paper that she had written was. So both Amazon and Facebook tried to get her recused from anything related to them, weren't successful. But a big part of this is very politically motivated and individually motivated. And that's my frustration with it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that you're wielding kind of a big stick with this thing that you may not quite understand some of the consequences you're creating. And even if all it does is cause a company to think twice about doing an M&A transaction or something like that, or multiple companies to start thinking twice or being more cautious or whatever, there's a trickle down to that.
Right.
That it's sometimes no different than we were just talking about, right? There's a longer term hangover that can occur from that. And especially on something that I'm not sure the FTC fully understands anyway of what they're actually doing. But I'll say
if you're agenda based or politically based in your decision making versus the better good, right, then you're not thinking about the trickle down effect. And I think what you just said is great. So quote in this, it says in this article, it says a challenge to Amazon's alleged monopoly could ultimately result in a breakup of the more than $1 trillion business if they file this lawsuit and win. Now, by the way, side note, they filed multiple lawsuits against Amazon and have lost each one, but none of them on the magnitude. But to your point about the trickle down effect, if Amazon started getting broken up into pieces, I'm sure there is going to be the trickle down is going to be to squash a whole lot of small cottage businesses and garage businesses and things like that, because Amazon's not going to change, their Wall Street's not going to change their expectation of Amazon. So, fees are going to go up, and we're going to see
there'll be a consequence no matter what. So
anyways, we're continuously here watching e-commerce. And so I thought that was good for us to pop in, which pops us on to our next article from Digital Commerce 360, B2B e-commerce survey, companies largely experiencing growth. Some good charts in there. I don't know if you looked closely at those. Any thoughts to kick us off on that?
The charts were great. And the one thing that really jumped out at me in this, when you take a look at this article, is the percentage of people that buy from certain channels. Yeah. And only 51% of respondents said they bought anything through a sales rep. And I think the highest level, I don't have the chart in front of me, but I think it was 70 something percent. So 51% was kind of right in the middle, in the median. So 51% of the people said they buy at all through a sales rep.
Right.
Now, granted, I understand that this is very industry specific, and you're looking at this at a very broad way, but that aligns with a lot of the things that we've been talking about and seeing, is that people wanting to do more and more things without having to necessarily deal with a sales rep. We see this more and more outside of the distribution world all the time, but I think more and more it's going to be the case. People are looking for things that they can do more on their own.
Right.
Yet at the same time, as we've talked about, the customer is expecting a similar level of experience and expertise that they may get from dealing with a good salesperson on the other end of it. So it's an interesting challenge. And I also think it's important, because I personally believe it's problematic that people don't want to deal with salespeople. I think salespeople can add a lot of value. They keep customers or prospects from getting lost and going down rabbit holes and getting confused and making wrong decisions or no decisions. So to me, it's a little bit scary that that's happening. But I think at the other end, we have to be able to somehow create an experience. And again, I think that's where AI can really help us as we go forward, is provide that better experience, even and that more competent experience, even if they're not dealing with salespeople. So that was a long answer to that question.
Just gonna say, you need to take a breath and grab some water.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah. No,
I liked what you were saying there, and what triggered for me out of this, right? Again, we're talking about a B2B e-commerce survey, and again, this is, the easy conversation with this is, right, to bury my head in the sand if I'm a manufacturer, wholesale distributor, and so I'm not seeing that. Yeah, it's good. Congratulations. Times are changing, right? Things are coming along differently. Oh, good. You're going to pop up. We can look at a couple of those charts. That's great. So that's really, really powerful to be in a position where it's not impacting you yet. But the reality of it is the world and the marketplace that we're looking at right here, and Will Quinn's comment here, it's generational, right? Gen Z wants to purchase online without sales interactions, because I say this all the time, right? The guy that just took over for your longtime buddy Fred at the plant down the street that you sell bearings or hard hats or whatever it might be to, or if you're in the restaurant supply business, Ralph that was running the commissary at a university or something, he's retiring. The person that's coming in behind him, that's been the assistant buyer, right, went on a date last night using Uber and ordering his lunch today from DoorDash to be delivered, right? He just is in a different world, Will Quinn's comment here. And that's where we're moving, right? We talk to people day in and day out. I was talking to a wholesale distributor in the building materials arena the other day, and he's like, well, most of our salespeople right now are struggling to, get their head around technology. They're in their 50s and their 60s. Some of them are doing a good job, but many of them are not. And we talked about the fact that every time he goes out and hires now, there's going to be people asking about what their tech stack looks like. And it's the same thing, right? When we look at e-commerce, it needs to be omni-channel, right? We both participated in the Industrial Supply Association's summer sessions about omni-channel. You wrote a book about it. It's over your shoulder there in the revenue zone. You talk a lot about experience and selling to people how they want to sell. So we've got to be prepared for these changes.
Yep. But anyway, interesting data points in there. I'd be interesting to see how that continues to play out over the next period of time.
Yep. Good. Well, this is, I'm going to let you take the lead on this next article about, it comes from CIO Magazine, or Chief Information Officer Magazine. Should you be worried about the informal rise of generative AI in the enterprise? So I'm going to let you start and shoot from the hip, and I'll dive in.
So basically what the article is about is, employees using Chat GPT or Bard or any sort of generative AI tools that are out there, sort of in a informal, or if you want to call it rogue way, within their companies, without approvals, without really any oversight, without anything going on. And, there's a lot of concerns on that. The most obvious one is, are you putting confidential or proprietary data into these large language models that can then be, now is training those language models? Now, we were talking about this before the show, Kevin. there are ways to turn that off and on. There's been more and more options now in these tools, but if people don't know that, or they're not aware of it, or whatever, there's a lot of things that that you can do with those things that are there. So it's what I found, and I've been putting a lot of time into this over the last few weeks as I talk to more and more customers about this, and really start to dig in about data. We've talked a lot about data, but what is it going beyond, clean data and data hygiene and all of that? What are the things that companies are starting to worry about as it relates to their data?
Mm-hmm.
They're of course related to security or privacy on that data, proprietary data, all of that kind of thing. That's a big deal. But then there's also data integrity. Is the data that I'm putting into this system, am I feeding it right with data that's actually factual or relevant or correct or
Right.
approved? Right. It's interesting. My background back in the day was change management for software. So
Mm-hmm.
managing the change process of software to make sure that things that people were writing code for didn't get into production and mess up the whole, production world. Right. And it's the same sort of thing here. It's like change management or configuration management on data to track, is this the right data? Is
Mm-hmm.
this approved data? Should this be data that we're using to drive our large language models? Can I prove, or do I have some sort of audit trail back when I use large language models to go back into the data that's there? So all of this, which is in this article, all of this kind of starts to open up this can of worms about data integrity, which goes way beyond data integrity and data privacy. And I'll add one more thing to it that just came out this morning. In addition to data hygiene, which is the data clean, and not full of duplicates and all of that. One last thing on this is that Microsoft yesterday or this morning announced that they will indemnify people that are using their new Copilot applications that are coming out after the first of the year if they get sued for copyright violation. They'll actually indemnify them. That's great that Microsoft, a trillion-dollar company, can do that, but it shows the amount of concern that's being generated around this subject.
Yeah, I think that's a bunch of malarkey, though. I'd love to read the T&Cs on how Microsoft will really indemnify you. Right? And I'm sure that's probably half of the, or 2x the terms and conditions of buying new software, right? Of what they'll really do and what they won't do, because that's a pretty broad statement. It's nice to hear, but I think the reality with all of that is that in the meantime you get sued. How soon is Microsoft going to step in?
I don't know. I think it's a great marketing PR thing.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
what it shows is the amount of concern that companies are having. And you can imagine, probably as they go to market with this, some of the concern they're getting from the Fortune 500, who they're selling to first,
Right.
is to, well, what about, all these different things you're incorporating these copilots into.
Yep. No, I think that's well said. So there's a whole nother take on this, right? That's another side in this. This is why I love what we do each week, because you and I will read even our guests, when we have guests, right? We'll all read the same article and have different takes. And I looked at this, the data side of it is critical as you were describing it, but the privacy side of it is so critical. And the big part of what this article was talking, about is, look, there's all these different tools out there. Right. And think about it. Just let's take it back. If I'm say a $500 million a year manufacturing company, and I'm a $100 million a year distributor. We talk every day to these companies in the course of our business with LeadSmart and our Channel Cloud product. We see everything from a 10 or 15 person IT department to, a multi-branch company that has one person that has, strong strengths in IT and maybe not so much, right? Sometimes it's just, we see in an organization, it might be somebody that, was doing another role in a company and had an aptitude. So they're now our CRM administrator or whatever it might be. But if you don't have a CIO as an example, who has to wear that hat? What senior executive and or the CEO at the end of the day has that role, right? And it really triggered for me some of the things, that you and I had a need to take a look at something yesterday. I sent it off to you for your thoughts on it. You came back 10 minutes later and you had run it through ChatGPT. But there was data in that we just put into the internet. right?
Well, we didn't because in our work, I have it set up so that we're not
Okay.
training the model. But if you didn't know that, then in theory, yes, it could
Right.
go.
So the vast majority of people are jumping in right now using ChatGPT or any of these other tools, right? And what's happening right now, and I don't know how an organization could keep up with it, is every day I see updates for all of, whether it's Jasper or Octopus or all of these different tools out there. And then marketing starts to say, hey, this is the coolest one I heard about at a trade show. I'm using this now. And then another one is saying, I'm using Chat GPT. And if the organization doesn't have a plan for using AI tools and a structured plan that says this is what's allowed and this is what's not allowed, you can get in a big problem. To the point, I'm going to use a couple examples. One from the article. Samsung put an internal ban on using Chat GPT because they learned it the hard way, right? Someone was trying to do some research and probably looking at code, and they put onto Chat GPT source unbeknownst to themselves, what part of what they put in there was code that was responsible for software that runs their semiconductor equipment. Well, that's out in the internet now, right? And so what percentage of chat, and this would be a great survey to find, what percentage of Chat GPT or Jasper or whatever it might be users out there, or Bard or whatever it is, have the forethought that you have to flip that switch to not allow that
Well,
data out there. And obviously we saw what happened at Samsung.
well, and OpenAI, the people that make ChatGPT, they released a new product last week called OpenAI Enterprise,
Mhm.
which allows you to have, because up until now, there's been no sort of enterprise version, team
Mhm.
type version where you can
Right.
say, okay, here is what your company should use.
Right.
And then they can create the settings at the corporate level.
Yep.
You all log on with your individual accounts, and then depending upon the individual accounts, they may or may not have depending upon what you put into place.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see at least now a framework for some enterprise control on some of these tools, but
Which is
it's
important.
still, which is important. But the OpenAI Enterprise is probably only going to be purchased by the biggest of companies right now.
Mhm. Right.
To your point, that the companies that we see a lot, the small or medium sized businesses, they're not going to have OpenAI Enterprise. And yeah, there's a lot of, so I agree, but it all comes back to ultimately the data, right?
Mhm.
It's like the more I look at the functionality, even if I look at Lead Smart, if I look at the future functionality that we're building
Mhm.
for AI, everything keeps coming back to how do I track and manage that data and have the right data and have the right privacy, the right integrity,
Right.
and the right hygiene.
Mhm.
Those are the three things. And when every time I try and look at new functionality, I end up going back to that point and taking a step back. So I think as a world, we're really starting to go, we got all caught up in functionality. There's more functionality coming every day. Now we have to backtrack onto those other things. And
Yeah.
that inherently starts to address some of the issues you brought up as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that if to both of our points at this right now, right, is the reality is these are wonderful tools. They're business changers. They're great for everybody out there. But you need to understand what you're doing, how you're using it, and whether you're an IT person in a distribution company and or you are a senior executive, you need to be thinking about how this is being used. I had an example that I caught myself on a number of months ago. You and I talked about this offline, and you use, because of the AI and GPT type tools that your team is building into our CRM and customer intelligence solution right now. You're on this stuff, nonstop. I mean, some of the stuff you send me on the weekends that you've been working on is just astounding, right? But I'm just, on my side of our organization, I'm a day-to-day user of these tools. But I was doing something in my personal life a few months ago, and as you know, I do a lot of faith-based volunteer work, and I was looking at a security plan that we had been for safety and security plan for our facilities and our sanctuaries while people are there for worship. And I had received from our global headquarters of our faith, I'd received a document to say, hey, modify this within your needs. But we had one from pre-pandemic. And so I just was like, well, I don't want to read these 12 pages, right? I want to find the differences. And I literally was starting to copy and paste to getting ready to put those into Chat GPT. And I triggered her. It was like, wait, why would I go put a security plan of where people gather, right, for bad actors to read the actual security plan? And those are the types of things, right? That's a personal issue, right? But dangerous. But if you start thinking about that, right, because of the way you can work with code and write code and so forth through these things, you may have somebody unbeknownst to themselves not thinking through that and putting critical
Of course.
financial data or
Yeah, of course.
whatever it is, right?
Of course. And the new the new tool that we should cover some one of these days, which is just unbelievable in Chat GPT, is they used to call it code interpreter. I think is now called detailed analytics or whatever.
Mhm.
The things that it can do are unbelievable. So, but it aligns with everything you just said there. I want to hit on a couple comments here
Yeah,
before we move on. First of all, yes, you're right. Will Lead Smart, especially having our $1 trillion valuation,
right.
we can afford to get that enterprise version. So, yeah, for sure, we will be doing that. Plus, I have to do that to keep Kevin from putting a lot of private data and stuff out there as well. So I have to protect our.
Actually, you should just take my computer from me and my
Yeah,
internet
yeah.
access.
So yes, you're right, Will. And then I think Tom is exactly right. Every organization needs to believe their data store is under attack. You have to look at it from a lot of different ways and protect it. Same for individuals who do business online to give some personal information to pay.
Mhm.
And when you talk about attack, Tom May, you're talking about it not just somebody trying to steal data in a company or hack your file systems or whatever. It's how is that data potentially going to be used, like you just said? Is it going to potentially drive what people believe are copyright? There's just a lot of aspects to
Yeah.
data that nobody's ever really thought much about before that goes beyond just I have it or I don't.
Yep.
And anyway, I'm going to be writing some stuff up on this over the next couple weeks on this, and we can share it because it really, really is interesting and is I think in the next 12 months, this is what's going to be the conversation around AI. It's not going to be the functionality; it's going to be about data.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're going to see that privacy piece right there next to it, right? And that the kind of in wrapping this up on this topic, right? They just one of the comments here is generative AI is on the loose in enterprises, and
Yeah.
the point being to this is you need, and we talk about this regularly, right? We've even posted some articles about how to put a plan together in place within an organization of how artificial intelligence is used and how these tools are used and what can be there and what can't, because back to what we were talking about at the beginning of all this, right, is if you don't have that, all your different departments might be using things for
Mhm,
different things, and then
mhm,
that one department has a little success and they say,
mhm.
oh, I was doing this, you should try it for this, and next thing you know, you have your data's on the loose, out there for bad actors. So anyways, good stuff. Thanks for your comments on that, and thanks for Tommy and others commenting on this as well. So
I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll kind of just touch on this next one quickly. The tech talk,
yeah.
the four main types of AI explained. This was a different take. I like the article because it was a little bit of a different take about sort of if you want to call it the evolution of AI
Hmm.
and looking at things that have historically been, well, even back, before Chat GPT hit the scene,
Right.
AI was around and has been used for predictive analytics for a long time.
Hmm.
So you give it something, it gives something back. They call that reactive. But
Yep.
then it talks about sort of the stages of how it's evolving to the point where it's proactively thinking, right? And you
Yep.
hear that a lot of well, does it, does it start to think? Does it have emotion? Does it have all of those sort of capabilities? Anyway, the article, without getting into it in a lot of detail, the article talks about the four evolutionary steps of this
Hmm.
and kind of explains it really well. And I think if you're interested in AI, I think it's a really interesting article.
Well, just because I'm the resident AI expert, I thought I'd chime in on this briefly. Is I'll wait for the comments to come, but that reactive AI, the article talks about that's that tool behind when the IBM's Deep Blue, they called it, right, in 1997, beat the Grandmaster chess champion Gary Kasparov, right?
Mhm.
So that's what that used back in
Mhm.
'97, and it talks about limited memory machines is kind of that next layer that was early 2000s, and this is good. There's some good timelines here. If it's something that's interest you, I think it's a value. I think at the end of the day, the more we all understand about what's behind AI without having to become AI experts, right? But we understand the pitfalls, the limitations, and the cautions that go with it. Everybody's going to be in good shape. So that's an article from techtarget.com. If you're kind of geeking out on AI stuff, they publish stuff every day. It's a good newsletter. So every week we have, and Tom, before you slide too far on that, I want to do a little timeout pause. If you are live with us here on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube Live, you're seeing the newsletter we send out every week. It's called Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution. It's focused on manufacturing and whole companies and wholesale distributors. If you don't get that and you would like to, you can find a way to get that by emailing us at hello@leadsmarttech.com or at the website for this podcast, which is www.aroundthehornpod.com. And that's what we're talking about. So we'll have many people, right? We have a larger audience on the podcast. Typically each week, 5 to 7 countries are downloading. And that's what we're talking about, because you can't see us if you're listening on the podcast. So each week we do what we call industry scuttlebutt, a little bit about M&A and so forth. So, there's 2 things out of these 3. There's 3 articles we do every week. I'm only going to mention 2 of them. One, big shout out to Brendan Breen, now the CEO of the Industrial Supply Association. We started working at LeadSmart with Brendan when he was new to the organization and a vice president. In fact, I had breakfast with him in Princeton, New Jersey in late 2021 when he was just in the running for the president's job. And he's done such a great job, and it's a wonderful organization that he's just been promoted to CEO. And I believe they've never had a CEO before, only a president. So big news. I was texting with him the other day. Friend of the show, has been on with us a few times, and congratulations to him. The Hardy, the Heating, Air Conditioning, and Refrigeration Distributors International Group, the trade association, some good revenue numbers. Their members are posting some nice growth through July. That's nice to see. The great folks at Hardy. We have quite a few LeadSmart Channel Cloud user companies that are members of Hardy. So that's good stuff. So let's bump through the last couple that we have here. Every week we have an additional feature that we call Good Reads. And that is something that typically might have something to do with leadership or personal development. This week we had an article there about how does your company compete. That came from Inc. magazine. It's some good thought-provoking ideas about, what are you doing to build a culture that's able to compete in your marketplace. And the feedback that comes from that, it really is irrelevant to whether, you make conveyor belts or you distribute food, right? Or you're a semiconductor company. Some great overall thoughts with that. So
yeah,
good. Any thoughts on that article or any of the previous ones that comment on, Tom?
No, I think that's good. Just
good
overview.
Yep. So let's kind of end the day with, we oftentimes, not always, in our newsletter have a special feature. And this week, our special feature is related to the We Supply America tour that's kicking off right now. We've got the website up. Will Quinn, that's with us, that commented today, one of the 3 major sponsors of Dirk Beverage's We Supply America tour, is in for. And Will gets in a motorhome. I'm sorry, Will doesn't, but Dirk gets in a motorhome, spends his summer traveling around the country. This is year 3, talking with and meeting with locally owned and family-owned businesses that truly supply America. So this year, I know we were on the phone together earlier in the week with APR Supply, which was the first video they had, but they were with Texas Plumbing and Midwest Wheel and Palmer Johnson Power Systems, IBT Industrial Solutions, and so forth. So this video series is getting ready to kick off. If you don't follow that, it's WeSupplyAmerica.net and Dirk Beverage. If you're not connected to Dirk or not following Dirk for some thought leadership regarding leadership and so forth, he is the guy to follow. I sent him a note this morning to see if he wanted to join us at the end of the show today. He's out, but I strongly recommend taking a look at some of those videos because they're great.
Yeah, they're out. The production value and just how they've been edited and put together. I watched the first one with APR. It's really, really good, really well done. I'm going to go pick Dirk's brain on some of his production techniques and how his live streams work and all of that, because he's setting the bar for us at another level. But well worth it.
Yeah, well, Dirk was with us on the show here last month. He's probably one of the most passionate guests we've had about wholesale distribution and the, as he calls it, the noble calling of distribution. And the more I think about that, it sounds a little grandiose, but the more I think about it, there's some real value to that. So we'll have him on again with us soon, but we always like to plug our guests when we can. So that's great stuff. So anyways, we did it, Tom, 50 minutes. You're always sending me Teams messages through this. We got to hurry. Let's move along. And we did it. So good show today. Thanks for the note, Mike Mortensen, about the insights this morning. I got a message this morning from the CEO of one of the largest distribution companies in North America. I'm going to be seeing him in next month at a trade conference, and he thanked me for our thought leadership in wholesale distribution. So that really kind of made me feel nice this morning. So I won't name him or the company, but I was greatly appreciative of that. We have some great guests coming up over the next month or two. And so we thank everybody for joining us. Tom, any exciting weekend plans?
No, but Tom May says he's going shopping this weekend to look for a shirt. I think he's referencing your shirt, but I'm not 100% sure.
Tom, you know me. It's Friday. It's an Aloha shirt. They're little flowers. Come on. So that's me.
But that's the requirement if he's going to co-host.
That's right. Yeah, you'll need to go buy yourself a rain spooner and join us for that. So weather will change before too long, and I'll shift out of Aloha and into my winter denim.
Back to your sweater gear. Yeah.
My sweater and denim. Right. So anyways, go Trojans, beat Stanford tomorrow. I hope everybody enjoys their Saturday college football. And Tom, if that's it for you, then thank you everyone for being with us. Again, if you're on the podcast and you're not getting our newsletter, please subscribe to that. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next week. Until we do, be safe, be kind, and have fun.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.